It's January 2013. You went out, you bought yourself a brand new AR. You've never had one before. You beat the rush. You got one while there was some still in the stores. And if you've never had one before, we're going to talk about some of the most rudimentary details of keeping one of these things working right, working smoothly, being reliable. We'll talk about that later. But first, we need to talk about the possibility of new anti-gun laws and how they might affect you as a gun owner. The time to join the National Rifle Association is now. The time to write to your legislators in Washington is now. And the time, even, yes, to write to the White House is now. Our website, flatbrokegunner.com, posts with great frequency a number of timely issues that pop up regarding the fight for our gun rights. As I speak, we have an editorial that we just put online about the fact that the White House apparently intends to bypass Congress and enact gun control as an executive action. This would be a very bad deal. I urge you to go to our website, read that, look at everything else we have there. Now, I don't know how many magazines you got with your new AR-15 variant, but if you didn't get very many, that could be a problem. And that could be a problem because these magazines tend to wear out, particularly the aluminum ones that are sometimes marketed as steel magazines. They aren't really steel, they're aluminum. There are a number of polymer choices. Probably the best, by all accounts, is the Magpul P-Mag, and you might have better luck over the long term with one of those. But as you're going to see, even a P-Mag can wear out because I had one wear out on me. The bottom line is whatever magazines you got of 20 and 30 round capacity are the ones you're going to most likely going to be limited to, at least in the near future, because by default there is a so-called assault weapons ban in effect right now. The guns are essentially unavailable in most stores in America because they've all been sold. Ditto with the magazines. Unless you want to pay ultra premium money, odds are very good whatever 20 and 30 round magazines you have now are the ones that are going to have to last you for the foreseeable future and maybe even longer. Now, we here at Flat Broke Gunner have quite a few magazines of 30-round capacity, yet we anticipate that at some time in the future there exists a danger that only 10-round magazines will be available. And if it does work out that way, it is our plan to pretty much use the 10-round magazines exclusively to save wear and tear on the 30-rounders. A lot of things can happen to them. They can get bent, the lips can get deformed. Sometimes, depending on the damage and what tools you have available, you can repair the things. But with many models, the springs weaken over time. It would probably be a good idea to pull the follower and the spring out of the body like this and store it that way to get the longevity out of the spring that you hopefully want to get. A P-Mag is very easy to take apart. There's a little button on the bottom. You push it and the bottom slides off. With the aluminum magazines, you usually have to pry one end of the bottom, lift it, and then it slides off. So that would be my advice on that. Let's talk a minute about what happens when a magazine goes bad. Here are two magazines taken apart. They're both P-Mags, a 20-rounder and a 30-rounder. So we can see the 30-rounder on the left. The follower, that is to say the thing the ammo rests on, has two long appendages underneath it that slide in the magazine body, and these appendages keep the follower from tilting either backward or forward. The advantages to this, I think, are obvious. If the ammo tips forward, you couldn't chamber around. If we look at the 20-round mag, we see the appendages are much shorter. In fact, there's not even one in the back, and that means the follower can tilt backward with this magazine. Now, the one we're looking at, the 20-round magazine, is in fact the one that wore out on me. I used this thing exclusively for a year and did a lot of shooting, and that is the only magazine I used. And that's probably got something to do with the fact the thing just gave up the ghost. Specifically, what would happen is when there were rounds in the magazine, those rounds would tip back when the bolt was pulled back over the top of them to charge around. The back of the top round would be too low because the ammo tilted backward and failed to pop back up all the way. The bolt would either slide completely over the top or it would catch the base of the round just barely. The round would go forward at an angle, the bolt would slide over top, and the thing would jam. And I've got two ARs. The magazine did it with both of them. It did it with real ammunition, and I have real ammunition that's all banged up. And it behaves the exact same way with dummy rounds. So here we see one of the guns, the mag, the dummy rounds. We haul the bolt back, let it go, jam. Here's another AR. We put the thing in, pull the bolt back, bolt slides over top of the round. We open it up, we look, we see the round is still there, untouched. Let go again, and it jams. Now my experience is that the most common kind of malfunctions you can get with an AR-15 type gun are these malfunctions. And I've been at the range and I've seen many other guys wrestling with them. I've seen the banged up ammo laying on the ground when they fail to pick it up. This seems to be the most common problem. I've got two ARs. One's a Bushmaster Carbon 15 and the other one's a Palmetto PA-15. Neither one was very expensive. The Palmetto is a mil-spec gun. It has an M4 type barrel profile. It has a chrome-lined chamber and barrel. And when I got it, I asked myself, how could they sell this thing for so little money? Well, I think if this gun is any evidence, the answer to that is they skimped a little on quality control. Here's a close-up of the carrier. You can see what was left of some unpolished, sharp edges that were on the carrier. Basically, I sanded the thing down with very light sandpaper, went over it with very light steel wool, and even when I was done, there were still some little gashes on the metal I could not completely remove. If you've seen any of my earlier stuff, you know I tend to do that quite frequently whenever I have some issue with the metal. I polished the thing considerably because anything that looked like it was going to cause abrasion inside that aluminum receiver would be something that would concern me. Additionally, when I got the Palmetto, the trigger pull was very weird. It was long and it was gritty. I'll give you the short story. Basically, I decided to take the thing apart and do whatever I had to do to fix it. So I had all the pieces laying in front of me, the hammer and the trigger, and I was Googling stuff and I was looking at pictures online, and suddenly I noticed that the hammer spring on my gun was on backwards. Now, this hammer spring is not something that comes off and on the hammer easily. You really have to wrestle it to get it on and off. I flipped it around to make it match the images I was seeing on my Google search, and when I got done, I had a much, much improved trigger pull on this gun. This photo shows the hammer spring in its correct position. Note the orientation of the hammer. Note the orientation of the long wires on the spring. We can rotate the spring around a bit. In one position it looks like this, and this is still correct. In another position it looks like this, and this position also is correct. I suppose there's at least some kind of slight chance with any of the other lower priced, or at least some of the lower priced AR variants you'll find out there, you might experience this, but who knows. The bottom line is, if you've gotten a gun, if you've gotten an AR, it's your first one, and you just got it in the great big giant rush at the end of 2012, there exists the danger that whatever it is you've got, you're going to have to live with it and make it work for you. Certainly there was a time when people could avoid problems by buying very high-end expensive guns, yet we have seen very recently that people were often reduced to buying whatever was available, and if that's the case, these are the kinds of things we might need to deal with if in fact we got a gun that wasn't very high priced. Now there might be some owners of new AR-15 variants out there that are not yet familiar with the fact that the way a direct impingement AR works, it shoots hot gas into the action of the gun, and all kinds of fouling accumulates on the bolt and the bolt carrier inside the action. Additionally, if somebody starts to do some early reading or research on one of these guns, they're going to hear maintenance, maintenance, maintenance. You got to clean it, you got to clean it, you got to clean it. Yet my experience is the proper kind of lubrication is far more critical in the short to mid-term than cleaning per se. In other words, if the gun is lubricated enough, lubricated in the proper way, it can stand to have quite a bit of fouling in the action and not really cause any functional problem. Now, I discussed this at considerable length in the video, AR-15 and Mini-14 Survival Preparedness. In that video, I tell how with the AR-15, what I do is use wheel bearing grease on the bolt and the bolt carrier. Now, this is not something I invented. This is something I read a long time ago, and And I'm not sure I would have bought an AR-15 type gun in the first place had I not read this, because there's considerable testimony out there about guns going 1,000 rounds or 2,000 rounds with the bolt and carrier not being clean thanks to this method. The main thing that needs to be remembered, at least before we leave this subject, is you put that on the bolt and the carrier only. It does not go in the chamber of the gun, and it does not go in the barrel of the gun. If you put it in the chamber of the gun, you get in it with too much pressure when the round goes off. If you put that grease in the barrel, you might end up with a barrel obstruction. You don't put that kind of stuff in the chamber or the barrel. It's the bolt and the bolt carrier only. Now, when it comes to cleaning the barrels of the two ARs I have, the Bushmaster has what's called a chrome moly steel barrel, and that just basically means it's dark steel. And the Palmetto, again, has a chrome lined chamber. Here the thing is open, and here you see that white metal around the throat of that chamber. If you do not see that, if you just see blued or dark metal, when you open up the gun like this, you don't have a chrome lined chamber. Chrome line means it is white metal, because that's essentially what chrome is. So does this create any difference in the way you need to clean the guns? Not necessarily, except the Bushmaster barrel, the molychrome, needs to be cleaned a little more thoroughly. By comparison, the chrome barrel does not accumulate fouling quite as quickly. On the Bushmaster website, there's an FAQ about barrel cleaning, and they're the experts, not me. You might want to check them out. So if you got one of these guns and it's your first one, I'm happy for you. Good job. There are some people out there that say, well, maybe we should let them ban these things. And to that I say, screw that. Like hell, we should let them ban them. We should fight this. And the way to do it is to contact the people in Washington who represent you. The battle for gun rights is essentially a battle of rural versus urban. The people in cities have the attitude, oh, everybody will protect me, and oh, I don't have to do anything to protect myself. But many of us whose families have lived in rural areas for generations know and understand, sometimes firsthand, sometimes from the experience of our ancestors, that if you're not prepared to defend yourself, when push comes to shove, there will be no one else there to do it for you. And that is why gun rights are so important in rural areas across wide expanses of the country. If you live in one of these areas, it is very important that you let your legislator know how you stand on this. And if you live in a large urban area and your representatives in Washington are protectionists and anti-gun, all the more important that you contact them, get in their face, let them know where you stand. And again, please visit our website, flatbrokegunner.com, where we're posting news about your gun rights as it happens.